Really happy, but also a little bit emotional about being recognized, like finally being recognized for my educational innovation.
I become more optimistic, and I wish that more people should know about the HundrED platform.
It's been so humbling to connect with so many amazing people, to hear about work that is happening all across the world.
The Innovators community is mind-blowing. Like, there's so many people doing so many amazing things.
This is my second time here, and it's An's third time here. To be honest, HundrED Summit is like coming home.
Hello, good morning. I know we're all tired. It was a long evening, but can we get just a little bit more energy this morning? Come on. Wonderful. Brilliant. I'm so happy to see so many of you here back with us today. And what did you think about that highlight reel? Last night was amazing, wasn't it? Yeah? Let's applaud the innovators once more. Brilliant. I am so pleased once again to be joining you on behalf of the inaugural Helsinki Education Capital event and this year's HundrED Innovation Summit. It truly was an inspiring start to the week yesterday, full of groundbreaking ideas, remarkable individuals making a real difference in the world of education. And I hope we can maintain that level of energy and excitement as we unpack the theme for the next few days, Education Futures in the Making. Before we get into today's program, I'd like to take a moment to remind everyone that this is a safe and inclusive space where we encourage open dialogue, mutual respect, and positive engagement throughout the day. Let's be mindful, considerate, and kind toward each other as we continue our discussions. And let's create an environment where everyone feels valued and heard. Today is all about reflection, collaboration, and action as well. And we'll be exploring the most pressing challenges and exciting opportunities in the future of education. We know that the discussions that you began yesterday and which will continue today will likely surface many ideas, reactions, and emotions, as we want to ensure that we can capture and share those reactions. And to do that, we'll be using an interactive tool known as the HoloTracker. You'll see a screenshot in a moment. So this is what the HoloTracker interface looks like, and we'll be using this to make it available to our in-person participants here today to register your thoughts, your reactions, what you're processing in the moment. The platform allows us all to make learning observations as a community participating in this summit. So please do share your reflections about yourselves or send an affirmation about your interactions here in Helsinki. The insights will be collated by Eek Yang. He's sitting there. Eek and the gentleman beside him, Wayne, are the young dynamos behind the app. And we'll be collating your feedback and presenting a summary of the observations tomorrow. Just by way of providing you with a bit more background information, if you check your summit booklets, you'll see a section titled Reflection Tool, and that provides additional information about using the app. And also, of course, if you think you might need a bit more technical support, please feel free to turn to Eek and/or Wayne sitting there. All right, so much for housekeeping matters. Now I'm excited to introduce Marjo Kyllönen. She's the head of development services for Helsinki's education division, where she's responsible for expert and development services for the city. You might also say, I think it's fair to say, that she's been a driving force behind the city's 2030 strategy. And I hope you made some time to get a copy of the document, which is titled Helsinki Learns Future Competences. But now I hand you over to Marjo.
I hope, yesterday we really had an inspiring day and evening, and as Dennis said, I hope that you did have some time to rest and to be refreshed for this day, because the flow will continue, I will promise you. Yesterday it was really interesting to hear about Michael's present and his insight about human flourishing. And that's something that we're going to continue and discuss together even today. I was so inspired last night at the Global Collection ceremony. So brilliant brains and thinkers and leaders for the future. So once more, congratulations on our side to these brilliant things that you presented us yesterday. There was, as Dennis said, a lot of energy and open-mindedness yesterday, and I'm sure that it will continue today. I have been asked to start the morning by telling you how the education division is building education for the future in Helsinki. And I have only a couple of minutes, so I will keep it very short. If I would be telling you also, it will take at least this morning. Yesterday afternoon, our executive director Satu told us a little about how important it is for us to focus on developing future skills and competencies of our young people and children, but also the adults. Future competencies are central for our day-to-day life and working alike. They are key for individuals, but also very important for the communities, to be able to build a sustainable and successful future for us all, for the societies and for the globe. That's the essence of future education. And our objective, it is to learn and teach and learn future competencies from the very early childhood up to the adult training. The whole learning span, the whole lifelong learning span that we are providing these services here in Helsinki. And we are working to strengthen the agency of our learners, providing space and tools for facing current problems, and most important, to reflect on alternative futures. We want our learners to have a strong sense of trust in the future and hope for the future. At the same time, we believe that the role of education is not only to develop or provide competencies and skills, but also values and attitudes needed to build a sustainable and just future. We will achieve this by encouraging the inbuilt curiosity of our children and young ones. the thing that they naturally have. And our job as educators is to feed their desire to understand, to modify and influence their world around them, their environment, and to make it more functional and better for each and everyone. Just like yesterday we heard the innovators of many great ways how we can promote this type of learning and growth amongst our children and young ones. It was really inspiring, as I said in the very beginning. I wish us all a very insightful, inspiring, exciting day. Let's learn together. Let's build a better future for us all, but specifically for our children and young ones, starting today. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Mario, for those insights into how Helsinki is positioning itself as a forerunner in transforming and strengthening education systems to meet current and future challenges. As we think about building education systems that are truly future-ready, it's clear that global collaboration and sharing best practices are an important factor. And to help us explore this dimension further, we're delighted to welcome Andreas Schleicher. He's Director for Education and Skills with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. However, unfortunately, Andreas was not able to join us in person today, but he did send a video in which he shares his thoughts on global trends and challenges in education and how we can contribute to shaping a more inclusive and innovative future. I'll depart the stage so that Andreas can have his say.
Thank you for inviting me. It's great to see Helsinki reaching out to the world as a global education capital. That's how we should think about education these days. Globalization and digitalization have connected people, cities, countries, and continents in a way that vastly increases our individual and also our collective potential. But the same forces have also made this world more volatile, more complex, more uncertain, more ambiguous. The world has seen a growing disconnect between the infinite growth imperative and the finite resources of our planet, between the financial economy and the real economy, between the wealthy and the poor, between the concept of our gross domestic product and the well-being of people, between what is technologically possible and the social needs of people, and between governance and the at least perceived voicelessness of so many. No one should hold education responsible for all of that, certainly not. But neither should anyone underestimate the role that the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes, the values of people play in social, in economic development, in shaping the cultural context in which we live. While digital technologies and globalization have disruptive implications for our economic and social structure, certainly, but those implications are never predetermined. It's always the nature of our collective responses to those disruptions that determines the outcomes. As the interplay between the technological frontier and the cultural, the social, the institutional, and economic agents that we mobilize in response. And that's what this event is all about. We live in this world in which the kind of things that are easy to teach and easy to test have also become easy to digitize, to automate. Of course, state-of-the-art knowledge will always remain important. But success in education is no longer mainly about reproducing content knowledge. It's about extrapolating from what we know, applying what we know creatively in novel situations. Deep understanding is so much more important than just remembering specific facts or figures. Think about history. History is not primarily about remembering dates or names of places, but about being able to think like an historian. Can you understand how the narrative of a society has emerged, how it developed, how it advanced, and sometimes how it unravels when the context changes? Or think about mathematics. We spend a lot of time training students to calculate an exponential function. But often we spend so little time help students think like a mathematician and understand the idea, the nature of an exponential function. And it's not easy, We're all used to a linear world. Now, time is linear, space is linear. That's the world in which we feel comfortable. But the discipline of mathematics can open up an entirely new world to us, a new way of thinking for us. And if we were better at understanding the nature of an exponential function, we would have sent, 1,000 doctors fight the corona pandemic when it broke out, not 100. Also the fact that advancements in literacy skills have fallen so sharply behind the evolution of the nature of information. That has profound consequences in a world where virality seems sometimes privileged over quality in the distribution of information. In this post-truth climate in which we now find ourselves, as sessions that feel right, but that have no basis in fact, they become accepted as fact. Algorithms that sort us into groups of like-minded people create social media echo chambers that amplify our own view and leave us insulated from opposing arguments that could have altered our beliefs. And those virtual bubbles homogenize opinions and they polarize our societies. And those algorithms are not designed for, they are exactly the principle of social media. There's scarcity of attention, but an abundance of information. We are living in this digital bazaar where anything that isn't built for the network age is cracking apart under its pressures. Will artificial intelligence advance education to create a truly level playing field that embraces the diversity of learners such that every individual is going to succeed, or will it super empower those with the right resources and dispositions and leave others further behind? Will teachers who have built their careers on knowledge transmission face the same fate as truck drivers in a world of automated vehicles? And hand routine, administrative, and instructional tasks over to technology? Will we see the emergence of an entirely new profession of educators who are able to build and support learners throughout their lives, a profession that embraces technology in ways that elevates the role of teachers from, just imparting received knowledge towards working as co-creators of immersive, of innovative learning environments, as coaches, as facilitators, as mentors, as evaluators? And what if artificial intelligence doesn't stop with facilitating learning, but drives forward the unbundling of educational content, delivery, and accreditation that forms the backbone of traditional educational institutions? In the digital age, anything that we call our proprietary knowledge and content today is going to be a commodity available to everyone tomorrow. Humans are unlikely to compete with the engaging opportunities which digital delivery provides. Clearly not. Now, accreditation still gives educational institutions enormous power to extract monopoly rents from students now. But, what if artificial intelligence and big data systems track whatever we are capable of doing and then provide an instant and up-to-date portrait of our knowledge, our skills, our attitudes? Any formal credential could remain little more than a receipt for the tuition that we paid at some stage in our life. And then, humans were always better inventing new tools than to use them wisely. AI is not a magic power. It's going to amplify good ideas and good practice in the same way it amplifies poor ideas and bad practice. AI can empower teachers to identify children at risk, or it can disempower them from exercising human judgment. While, AI is ethically neutral, it's always going to be in the hands of people who are not neutral. The only reason why we should fear AI is because it will always obey us and never rebel. So tomorrow we will need to think much harder how we can help learners think for themselves and join others with empathy in work, in citizenship. How we help learners develop a strong sense of right and wrong, a sensitivity to the claims that others make on us, and a grasp of the limits on individual and collective action. Education in the industrial age figured out to educate second-class robots. In this age of AI, we will need to figure out what it takes to be human and how we can complement, not simply substitute, the artificial intelligence we created in our computers. Where education doesn't build foundations under people, many are going to try to build walls around them, no matter how self-defeating that's going to be. And AI is always good at reinforcing those walls. No? So that's why we need Helsinki as a global education capital.
Wow. Did you feel the passion? He really believed in what he was saying. And I just want to leave with you a few of the points that Andreas made that stayed with me. One of the things that I thought was interesting was that he pointed out the many dichotomies in our global environment between surplus of information and scarcity of attention, between fact versus feeling, something that's so real to us today, between technological advances and intractable challenges. And I was especially intrigued by his call for education to make a shift toward applying knowledge to solve problems rather than just accumulating facts. And finally, the idea that I think many have articulated as well, that AI is not a silver bullet. It's not ethically neutral because people are not. Food for thought. Anyway, moving on, I'm pleased to introduce to you Jennifer Adams. She's going to be joining me on stage here, or replacing me on stage rather. She is the editor-in-chief of the Knowledge Hug Signature Leadership Series. And Jennifer has been a key voice in shaping discussions around the future of learning with a focus on empowering educators and leaders to drive innovation and inclusivity. Today, she'll be leading a panel of esteemed experts to share insights on how can we recreate our education systems for the future. Jennifer will join me on stage, and she will introduce her guests.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today's session is designed to not be just your typical panel, but a discussion that all of us will be taking part in. I'm thrilled to say that we are being live streamed. We have, in addition to the 100 or 200 people that we have on in the room today, we're joined by 680 registrants that signed up to be part of this discussion. And you'll see by the format, this is going to be very interactive. So thrilled to have that group with us. We're also being live streamed by the city of Helsinki, so we have lots of educators from across the schools and the system in Helsinki. So in addition to our esteemed panelists, we should be able to have a wonderful discussion on creating education systems that support human flourishing. So thanks very much for being here. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our panelists today. And I'm going to start off with Mario. Mario, of course, all of you know as the Development Services Director for the City of Helsinki. But what you don't know is that I had an opportunity to first meet Mario in 2015 when we were together at an activity with the OECD in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And from the very first time I met Mario, I knew that both our countries, Canada and Finland, had some common thoughts about what we need to be doing for our children and our teachers and our communities, but also a very personal connection. So welcome to Mario.
Thank you.
I'm going to go way over to the other side now and introduce you to Tony McKay. Tony McKay, many of you will know him as the consultant advisor to the Global Cities Education Network. He has a long history in leading education in Australia. He is also the board chair for the National Center on Education and the Economy out of Washington, D.C., but a major influencer out of Australia, and we're happy to have him here as well. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you Shelley Montgomery. Shelley Montgomery is a superintendent in the city of Ottawa. We have we actually have 4 education systems, I won't get into the details there, that are all publicly funded education systems. And the district that I worked in worked very closely with our coterminous board. Shelley is going to talk to us a little bit about what human flourishing looks like when we're actually trying to have it happen at a district level. So welcome to Shelley. So without further ado, how this is going to work, for the first little while, we're going to have some presentations, some opening comments by the 3 panelists, and then we want you to dive in, and we're going to be interactive. So for the people that are online, my friend Alex is going to be watching questions that are coming in, and we will go over to Alex and see if we have some great questions coming in from around the world. But we also want you to feel welcome to be putting up your hand and giving us a comment. This is, when we talk about human flourishing, we have to model that ourselves, right? This is about all of us coming together, sharing ideas. No one's an expert. We all contribute. So that's how we're going to work for the next little while. And I'm going to start off with my friend Tony. Tony, the OECD, it was great to hear the introduction by Andreas. And the OECD has done some really interesting work on the concept of human flourishing. And of course, what I think many of us like about it is it's the concept of not only learning and student achievement, but integrating with well-being. We're talking about holistic education that is really helping children and adults to not just survive, but to thrive. We'd love to hear some opening comments from you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning, colleagues, both in the room and online. It's a delight to be in the global learning city of Helsinki, a place that I have visited many times and continue to have strong connections. So brilliant to be here at a moment when, as you say, Jennifer, the conversation around our learning systems and the need to transform our learning systems for exactly the way in which you've described it, namely, how can we as humans think about our futures, in a way where we can be serious about looking after ourselves, looking after others, and looking after the planet. And that's not going to happen without transformation of the way in which we currently, in many places, both global north and global south, think about the nature of our learning systems. Now, we should make it clear that at this moment and for many years, systems have been in transition. It's not as if there is a dominant system that continues to determine the way in which we might think about the possibilities of the future. We have got many futures alive and well, and we're in a room where many people are leading elements of that transformation agenda. So I want to come back to that, but I want to be clear that I think the narrative that we are now signing up to, many of us here and elsewhere, is a narrative that is not a narrow definition of success. It's not a narrow definition of what counts for excellence. It is a much broader concept of how we think about humans flourishing, thriving, living well as we think about this next period of time. And because of so many of the forces that we are contending with, ones that are concerning us very, very deeply, the need for a learning system to assist us to transform our lives, ourselves, others, and the planet is even more urgent and intense. By the way, I think some people describe that as being making sure that we are able to increase our level of economic prosperity. certainly increased our level of social cohesion. And centre over this last period has been the language around well-being, individual and collective. So I think as we gather here, we know that there is a new story that we need to lead, a narrative that is going to enhance our lives, hence the concept of human flourishing. Let me just make a couple of points. First, it's not as if we have not spent time thinking about futures. OECD that you've referenced published 6 scenarios back at the beginning of the 2000s, and just in the last 2 years have published a refreshed 4. And when we did the early work on the scenarios, one of them was teacher exodus and meltdown. And we said, well, that will never happen. Right now, one of the biggest challenges for all of our education systems globally, and I mean everything from preschool right through to tertiary and the world of work, one of the biggest challenges that we've got is that our supply and demand of educators is a major, major challenge for us. It's interesting, in the first set of scenarios, we talked about schools as core social centres, and there was the idea of actually coming together and making sure that services could be gathered in a way where the needs of young people, the whole person, could be met. In the last set of scenarios, the language has actually shifted to schools as learning hubs. And the learning hub, and by the way, I think even the language of school, which we are holding on to, but surely we are reconceiving what we mean by a school. When a school is connected to its community, when it has partnerships across multiple dimensions of civic society, when a school is actually curating experiences that are formal, informal, and non-formal, it's not the way in which we normally think about schools. So I just want to say that I think we've got a conception of the future that is much more powerful and certainly more capable of being able to deliver for us fulfilling lives. Second point, yes, we've been working with a number of countries over 6 years now with their permanent secretaries or their directors general or their directors of strategies. Mario, we've had gatherings in multiple places, high-performing systems for tomorrow, and education for human flourishing has really started to come as the kind of storyline. By the way, it's not an easy language to then communicate to everybody. People have different views about this. But when you start thinking about adaptive problem solving, ethical decision making, aesthetic perception, those kind of competencies, that was under my pillow last night, Mario. I just want you to know that I'm starting to really absorb this. But we are clear now that we need to appreciate that the capabilities and competencies that we require in order to become more human in an AI world are not simply a list of foundational knowledge, skills, dispositions. So I feel as if the language is starting to move. By the way, we have not been constrained by our capacity to gather data on how young people are performing in areas other than academic. OECD has been gathering this data since 2015. They refreshed it into 2022 data. We have got an index with multiple dimensions that go to the very heart of well-being. Some people call it the happiness index. The interesting thing is that we have not been able to spread that in the same way as we can spread other PISA results. But we are getting there, and that's what people are looking for as evidence of human flourishing. So we are not without a considerable amount of work and support across Global North and Global South about that shift. Next point, and I've only got 2 more to go given the time. Let me just say that I think we need to consider, therefore, how the system operates. So systemness is really crucial. Charlie Ledbetter and others have been working with us to think about how you make the shift. And often people think that we've got system one, the dominant current, and then we aspire to a new future. And we create that future and we work towards it. You don't get from to without going through. And at the moment, there are an enormous number of experiments and innovations, but they go beyond that. They actually become minimum viable systems. So they give you a sense of what that future looks like in a system that has become transformed. The problem often is that system one, how can I use the language? In some places it's like regime fight back. So they see things happening, power structures get disturbed, and then they try to appropriate those developments. And all of a sudden, rather than you going towards system 2, you've got fantastic innovations and experimentation that are the beginning of a new system being absorbed and don't have the opportunity then to really start to flourish as a new system. But I think we're getting there. I really believe that at the moment we are starting to make major shifts in the way in which we think about our system, and we're getting more and more evidence about what that looks like. And the language is often more around learning ecosystems, network-based, rather than hierarchical systems, and it certainly puts the focus upon the local. The way of shifting our systems is actually at the local, and then you obviously build the local. You manage to enroll the middle of the current system, and then you, as Michael Fullan says, you intrigue the top. Policymakers get really intrigued about how they can actually shift. Finland is a perfect example of how that is working in a way that I think is taking us in a new direction. My final point is to say this does not happen without leadership. And the kind of leadership we're talking about is of a different order. Because if you're going to be leading system transformation, human flourishing, one, you need to have a good narrative that you can communicate really powerfully. Yep. Second, you have to actually understand ecosystems. Next, you have to actually understand that this is for everybody, so it's an enlarged concept of equity. Then you've got to commit yourself to innovation. It's not a question of just believing that somehow we've got an answer. You are constantly innovating and experimenting, hence why we're gathered here, why the city and HundrED are such a powerful combination with the ministry to take forward a new approach. And obviously, in the end, you've got to be really futures literate. You are constantly anticipating a future. By the way, this does not happen without us enrolling the political level as well, right? And when it comes to the political level, we've done a lot of work to show that politicians at every level, city, state, federal, right, world, they want us as professionals, and I mean that in terms of multi-professionals, because the educated workforce is expanding, more diversified. They want us to take the lead. They want us to talk about it, to show it. They want us to actually be able to gather international evidence of the kind that Andreas spoke about. They want to be able to develop their own political capacity to become part of this, because they are otherwise caught in electoral cycles, in constituencies that are not as brave and courageous. But if we, as a profession, can be leading that work, working with our political leaders and all of those in community, then I think we've got a chance of coming together and really seriously advancing this work. My final comment would be, this will not happen unless we are really clear about purpose. It will not happen unless we share power, because this is a different way of working. It won't happen unless we build the relationships with all of those players. And I don't think it's actually going to happen unless then the resources that will help us follow the purpose. It is really a question about how we think of doing this work, and we are doing it well, and I think we are well on our way to transforming our learning systems for human flourishing.
Thank you very much, Tony. Some wonderful opening comments. And Tony, as you were talking about this concept of school and how we need to almost transform even that language, I thought of the activity, the event that we had last night. And for those of you that are online and may not have joined us last night, HundrED has had an event last night where they celebrated 100 different innovators from around the world. And what I really appreciated about that event is that we heard from innovators, many of whom are in this room, whether it was educational technology or implementation programs. Many of them talked about what education looks like when it's not in a school building. It's really a learning environment. And that learning environment can take place within formal education, outside of formal education, and more informal settings. Some of the innovators talked about how they brought in mothers to be helping with the delivery of education, and community members that were leading this. So as we look to human flourishing, we really have an expanded opportunity because we're no longer limited just to the people, and don't get me wrong, our teachers, our principals, the people that are working in our schools, fabulous, but they have more support now because we're more inclusive and looking to our local communities to help us with that precious job of helping our children develop those skills to be living in a flourishing world. So thank you for those comments. Anything else on that concept of outside of schools, Tony, before we go over to Mario?
Only to underscore your very point. I think the way in which we are undertaking this work requires us to reconsider and redefine work, the work of learning, the workforce, the educated workforce, and the workplace, the environment, the learning environment. And I think the more we can see that those three things combine together in order to take us in the direction of travel that we want, consistent with our purpose, the better. I used to think seriously about the concept of de-schooling. You might remember, well, you won't remember this because you need to be as old as I am to go back to the 1970s and Ivan Illich. And what we've discovered, of course, is that there's been variations on this over a period of time. I think now school, providing it's within the discussion and context that we're having, can be the most powerful agent, right? But not one that is confined, not one that has the current grammar of schooling. This requires a new grammar of schooling.
Super fun, very exciting, and I want all of you to be thinking about questions, etc., because we're going to be getting into that interactive part. But first of all, we're going to go over to Mario. Mario, some opening comments from you and from your experience in Finland.
Yes, thank you. And before I go to my kind of written notes or what I had in mind to tell you about, I just want to comment something, Tony, you said. First, what you said about, and Jennifer, about this learning environment, actually that's something that we launched almost 8 years ago in our previous strategy for Helsinki, city of Helsinki, that the whole Helsinki is the learning place and space for all the learners, starting from the very small one up to the adults. And it has been realized. I think it's something that we are breathing today, that we take it for granted, that you can't capture learning inside a school building or early childhood education building. Then something you said about a narrative, that we need to have a narrative, and we need to have leaders who have a narrative to lead. It's not telling people to do things, it's more like inviting them to do things together. And I think that also aligns a lot with the concept of leadership that we are having here in Helsinki. And our narrative for the future is here. And it's politically given to us. Our current mayors and deputy mayors in the City Helsinki strategy, a growing place, a place for growth, sorry. So there was a line that said that we need a strategy for education 2030 to see a bit further, to see we have 4 years periods of the current council, so to have the objectives to look further, but then act locally. And that's something that we are also executing now. And how the system is functioning, how do we then implement this? So we have some criteria that or some kind of principles that we are following. First, this is not a book to look and a to-do list. It's a vision for future. It's a guideline, a joint guideline where we want to be in 2030 and even beyond. And then we respect a lot the local decision making and an empowerment of our principal teachers, every daycare center, every school, every learning institution, educational institution. So what is everyone's take for here? It's something that everyone is thinking of, that what is suitable, what is fitting the environment where we are, the teachers, the other personnel we're having, and what are the needs for our children from that very local point. And I think that was also, Tony, what you already kind of referred, that in Finland we are decentralized, and it means in Helsinki that we respect the choices of our our learning places. So this is something that is, as I said, our vision for the future, but it's also strongly politically agreed that these are the things that we want to promote now and in the future. And I'm just going to pick 3 points that what is the essence of this. And in this one slider, you can see kind of in a nutshell that what we are thinking when we are thinking about and how to build up the sustainable future. And the first is seen on the headlines, well-being and well-learning in Helsinki. We strongly believe, and we know it by research, that there is no well-learning without well-being. And in other words, we have to put well-learning in the heart of, well-being in the heart of learning to promote good and sustainable learning. And in a way, well-being is a prerequisite for learning, and that's why we want to promote learning that itself is producing well-being of our learners. Not to put that on the separate channel, but to think of the learning processes in the way that the learner can feel that they are the owners of their own learning process, and they can feel the joy of learning new things. Because we believe that when you promote well-being and happiness, so that's the way we allow our children to flourish. And that's our concept of education for human flourishing. And because then, when they have this experience, so then the learner's self-concept, as we know, it's a key. So this is the way to enhance and to strengthen the self-concept of our learners, as they know that they are the drivers, they have the control of their own life. The second thing is seen in the center, and then they're in the future competencies. We know, and we heard also from Tony, from Andreas, that social and emotional skills play a greater role than ever in building up sustainable and successful future for individuals and our societies. And actually, social emotional skills, together with a bit more academic skills, they form the basis or the core for all learning. And when we are speaking about key competencies and skills, so we are thinking quite similar what Andreas said, that it's not like technical skills like mathematics, but how to teach our children to think like a mathematician, or how to teach them to think how a historic researcher. And those are the core key competencies and skills that we have to build on. And obviously, literature skill is a key and very essential, but key competencies and skills, academic skills, are not sufficient at all. We need the social and emotional skills are equally important. And then when we have the core of these skills and competencies, when we are focusing on strengthening these skills, so then also the future competencies can grow. And with the future competencies, we think of ability to think about the future in the creative way, anticipatory manner, and find alternative solutions together. And this type of transformative competence is needed specifically and particularly in these times and in the future when we are facing uncertainty and unpredictable future. So these traditional ways of thinking and acting they are not sufficient anymore. And to build up this type of transformative competence, it requires some kind of ability of boldness to shake the establishing patterns and operational models, and courage to try something that we are not exactly sure what the end result is. Hope, faith, and trust in the future comes from our ability to meet uncertainty and to solve wicked problems together with our learners and make a difference build a better future, shape your future for the sustainability and success for individuals, communities, and the whole planet. But these skills, these future competencies and these core key competencies and social emotional competencies, they are not hierarchical, but they must be developed together in the very beginning and in interaction. And my third point is agency and co-agency, to be part of the community. As said, education should promote social emotional well-being and social cohesion and sustainability of individuals and the whole planet. And social emotional well-being, it's also tightly connected to the sense of belonging to the society and to the group where you are learning. And actually, very essential thing is that our learners, our children and young ones, they must have a real experience of being subjects of their life and active members of society. And this type of genuine experience of participation or agency, it brings us a sense of belonging and motivation and understanding that you have the ownership of your own learning process that I already had said, and your actions make difference. And that is also the best way to prevent polarization and exclusion from the society. So this is our dream, not only dream, this is our vision for the future, and this is what we want to execute in everyday actions, not a separate vision, but something that can be realized and be lived through our actions in our kindergartens, schools, and educational institutions.
Mario, thank you so much. As always, Finland comes up with great visions of what their future can look like, and we learn from that. I'd like to get a quick show of hands in the audience, because I love the phrase that the tagline for your document, which was well-being and well-learning. How many people kind of like the concept of that? Interesting, right? And I don't know if you're experiencing that in your system, but we had there was a little bit of confusion. The good news from what we heard from educators was that they were happy that we were finally acknowledging the roles that schools and educators really play, that it's more than just a student achievement, but they're really developing whole children, whole students, and helping them to develop their skills. So on the one hand, our educators told us that they were really happy that there was an acknowledgement that it's not just about student learning, it's about student learning and student well-being. On the other hand, the feedback that they gave to us was, so do we have to do two different things? And the more that we looked at it within the system that I was in, what we thought was the linking piece was pedagogical practices. That how do we have pedagogical practices that embed both well-being and well-learning? So I know that you've done a lot of work with pedagogical practices in your system. Just a quick comment, Mario, is how that's helping to link.
Actually, I think there's the key that we need. A school can't solve all the problems, definitely, and that's not what we are thinking. But to rethink of our pedagogical practices and how do you build the learning environment, what are the tools you are using, and specifically how are you communicating with the children, so that instead of thinking hardly that how can I promote well-being, how can I do the ABCD, obviously there are things that you have to, and we have the system for pupils' welfare groups in schools, but I think the magic happens in everyday actions in the classrooms, that how do we execute this kind of teaching profession? How does our pupils feel that their well-being is taken care of whilst they are learning? But then in this audience there are some of our teachers who can really give you a good examples. I know, maybe you can raise your hand. No, they are too sad. But anyhow, so that's the key, and that's something that we are working together with our teachers. I have teacher's background, but I would be like, people would laugh at me if I'm starting to say ABCD, but it's something that we want to work together with our principals and our teachers, how to build that type of environment and learning atmosphere.
Wonderful, and I think, Tony, it goes back to the idea of, what will this look like in the future? And part of our hope is the work that our educators are doing in the classrooms to really be thinking about those open pedagogies and inquiry-based learning and project-based learning. And I know we've got an amazing speaker that's going to be coming up just after this to talk about some really interesting work that's happening in Nigeria. So really exciting things are happening. I'm going to hand it over to Shelley Montgomery now. Shelley works in a school district, like I said, that's side by side and interacts with the school district that I was from in Ottawa, and doing some amazing work on how do you build within a district the application of what we're seeing in the research coming from the OECD and from other groupings. What can it look like in a district? So Shelley, over to you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So I'm very excited and honored to be here this morning and to be alongside Tony and Mario and Jennifer, and especially all of you. It's an amazing experience for us to be learning at a global level, so I just want to thank all of you as well for listening to us this morning and learning with us. So I am from Ottawa Catholic School Board. I represent one of 72 school boards in Ontario, in Canada. The federal government doesn't fund the provincial education, but the provinces do. So we're one of 72 provinces, and in our school board, we have 89 schools, and we just hit our 50,000 students, so we were excited about that and had a little celebration. We have over 5,000 employees, and we have French immersion in all of our schools. So with us today, I have our Associate Director, Mary Dunahee, and two of our superintendents who are here for support for me while I speak about our school board, so I'm excited that they're here and grateful. So I'll go on to the next slide. So what I think I'm here to do is share an example, and we heard so many wonderful examples last night, and congratulations to all the award winners, about an example where learning that nourished all of our students went scale across our system. We were able to touch every one of those 89 schools, we feel, in one way by using the deep learning framework. So deep learning framework is work by Michael Fullen, and we've been working with him from the Ottawa Catholic School Board for over 14 since 2010, I believe. And the reason we feel that this framework has worked really well to go scale across the system is because every educator can find an entry point. So as you see on this slide, there's the 4 elements, and then there's the global competencies. And we've been hearing the word competency from everyone here this morning. But we've also been hearing the word pedagogical practices, learning environments, all of those 4 pieces. And at the Ottawa Catholic School Board, we heavily supported, district system leaders heavily supported our educators, but we also left it up to the schools. We gave them lots of autonomy to be able to move this forward. So over a number of years, we started with 8 schools. We heavily supported, and then it looked cool. You wanted to be part of that project. And then we went on to 20 schools, and then we eventually went system-wide. So I'll go on to the next slide. So I'm going to give an example, a practical example. We have many examples of deep learning that was successful, that empowered students to be lifelong learners. And that's the key. That's why the Ottawa Catholic School Board went in this direction, used this framework, gave entry points to every educator, principal, teacher, because we believe that it empowers students to be lifelong learners. So here's one example that it's volunteer, so it's called our Social Entrepreneur Program, and it aligns beautifully with the deep learning framework. So what it is, very briefly, it is where a teacher on their own, they sign up for this, and now it's grown and grown, and they partner with a business partner, not an educator, so going outside of education, and it's volunteer, so these business volunteers work with the class all year long. And we're always looking for more business partners, so if you're a business person and you want to contact me, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, that would actually make it even better. So they partner and they work all year long with a class, and they develop a business. So they create the business, they find the seed money, they develop a product, and then from there, the kids have to figure out what their profit's going to be, and then they the most important part is they pick a charity of their choice. So it's really fun to see the charities that the students select. And then they work all year long on this project. This is not just a 1-month thing. They're supported again from central staff at the board office. And from there, at the end of the year, they give their profit to their charity. And so, there's that fun check presentation and that sort of thing. And we have also partnered with Shopify, which is an online website where the students can sell, their Christmas ornaments or whatever it might be, soap that they've handmade and all that sort of thing to their grandparents and aunts and uncles or whatever. So obviously, partaking in a project like this all year long is developing all of those global competencies. They're becoming better citizens. It's developing their character. They're being creative. But it's also simultaneously being very creative and innovative in how to teach around literacy skills and numeracy skills. And a teacher is doing that all year long using a program like this. So this is one example where we have multiple, from kindergarten to grade 12s. Kindergarten students participate in this. And then we have grade 12 classes also doing it. But it's driven by the students and by the teacher with a business partner all the way through the year. So that's just one example. And I'll go on to the next slide. So here I am talking about great Ottawa Catholic School Board. We have pockets of excellence, but we do have we can say it's gone scale. And it's nerve-wracking, but we had 2 researchers from the United States that actually were in the search of deeper learning. And they have been in the search of deeper learning for a while, where it's gone scale. And so they came up to Ottawa, and they decided to interview our teachers, so Sarah Fine and Jal Mata, and they together, commissioned by NPDL, they wrote this article called A Big Tent, Strategy for System-Wide Transformation, and they found deeper learning in our schools because they interviewed our students. They could speak that language. Our students could speak the language. They interviewed our teachers. They interviewed system leaders. And what's so interesting, why they're calling it Big Tent, is because we've provided the framework. All of our schools have to implement or incorporate deep learning into their school improvement plan every year. So that part of it, we're supporting heavily from the system. But then they can choose from within that which strategies they would like to use. And I know in our session the other day, they used matrix. I think somebody had said that. We see it happening in many different ways. But they found that across the system, because we have been messaging that from the system since 2010. And it hasn't been just one director of education that has been promoting deep learning. It has been, actually, we're on to our 3rd, and Tom D'Amico, our Director of Education, is a huge innovator and champion of this. And so it's happened over a number of years, over multiple leaders, with lots of capacity building. And so, yeah, we're very proud of that, and we're happy that they came and interviewed a whole bunch of our staff, and that they found that consistently, at least they knew the language, the common language of deep learning. And some teachers, went really big with it across the system, and others just may have tweaked something. They may have developed a partnership. And that's all they did, but they knew that language. And when I say everyone owns deep learning, and that's what they say in the article, in our board, even our Associate Director of Finance, Lisa Shimmons, who I think is watching right now at 2:45 a.m. in Canada. Hi, Lisa. She came up to me last year and said, what, we found money, unspent money, and said, why don't we put that into flexible learning spaces to align with our deep learning framework? So even our finance people, our planning and facilities superintendent, Miro Vala, because we're a growing board, we've actually built 4 brand new schools in the last 2 years. And that's a lot of work for them. But they incorporate the deep learning framework into the building. They have meetings with us regularly to say, have we created enough collaborative spaces? So it's actually gone that deep. And our OAs, our custodians, our caretakers, they all know the language of deep learning. When you're creating flexible learning spaces, in the beginning, it's like, this is hard to clean around, and we're unionized and say, well, this is why we're doing this. It's, it's going to create lifelong learners. So, and the last slide, very quickly, I know with time. So what's next? We all know that AI is next. So how do we incorporate that with our ongoing framework that we're using at our school board that's gone scale? We basically, and I'm going to whisper the word, we mandated this year that everybody does have to focus on critical thinking. So normally, as I said, the schools have autonomy. They can choose whatever critical or whatever global competency they want to go deeper with. But this year, we're asking every teacher, K to 12, to explicitly teach 2 critical thinking lessons. And we've developed this website. We've had teachers share their lessons with us, and we're actually offering a prize every month to pull a name for teachers who have been willing to share their critical thinking lessons, and they're being uploaded on this website. And we've also, taken critical thinking lessons from across the globe when we've done a lot of research to develop this. So this is kind of our next step in terms of incorporating our deep learning framework to nourish the students and empower our students to be lifelong learners. So we're using critical thinking this year to align with our AI work. We have embraced AI at Ottawa Catholic School Board. We're very proud of it, but we then have the responsibility, we're pushing it forward, we're like, use it. We've developed guidelines and principles that we're using, but we also have to be accountable to that. So if we're pushing AI at this fast rate, we better make sure that we're continuing to push critical thinking skills as we've all talked about. So that's just an example that I'm happy to share from on behalf of the Ottawa Catholic School Board.
Thanks so much, Shelley, for sharing your story. And I think those of you online and those of you here in the audience today can imagine why I asked Shelley and the team from my neighboring district to really talk about what this looks like when it's an ecosystem that is developed within a system. And Shelley talked about, you know, everyone being involved, from the custodian, from the facilities people, from the educators, everybody's doing this. Tell me about common language, because when I think about what we're talking about here, and I'm looking to the panelists as well, we're talking about education for human flourishing. So how do we build that common language? Shelley, just a comment on common language. What were some of the things that you did to really make sure that every student could speak that language? Your teachers could speak it, your leaders, your custodians, your parents as they were coming into schools. Just give us a little sense of what that looked like.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking that, because one of the most successful pieces I think that we've had is coherence in our board. So where every single time our director or any of our superintendents we speak publicly, we somehow try and mention deep learning. It's actually part of a monitoring checklist we have. So we know that the new teacher induction program is coming up. So we are going to mention whatever leader, system leader is speaking at that, we're going to mention something about deep learning. So and if they're speaking at Christian Community Day in front of all 5,000 employees, it's going to be mentioned. So no matter where we are, it is very intentional and purposeful that we speak about something to do with deep learning and how we need to incorporate that into our schools and into our classrooms. So it's about coherence and being very intentionally speaking about it. We also, if you want to be a teacher in our board, although nowadays we're going to take, you know, as we all know, we'll take any teacher really, if you want to come work with Ottawa Catholic, but we will ask you a question around deep learning. There will be a question about what can you tell us, even if it's something small. And every principal in the board, if they want to be a principal in our board, they have to actually do a presentation, a 10-minute presentation that aligns with deep learning, something they've led in their school that would demonstrate evidence of deep learning. So I would, in terms of common language, you can't get away from it, I would say.
Can I pop in?
I was just going to say, I know Mario and Tony are going to want to jump in.
Yes. And actually, it was lovely to hear what you said about the common language and commitment. And that's something that we have also been discussing with this. We have more than 15,000 people working for the city of Helsinki. So it's not realistic that when we launch this in February, so now if you go to any of our schools and ask any teacher, so maybe they can be a bit confused, and what is this Helsinki Learners Future Competencies? But it's something that we want to be a kind of a part of everyday activities.
Right.
And I know I have used that, and my colleagues also, that, for example, recruiting people to new posts. So we use, well, we even give them a link that, okay, you can look, here is our vision, and we will put it in a practice in a way that it's seen everywhere. Whatever we do, we can reflect that, okay, that was what we are planning, and this is how we are going to continue, these are the next steps. And I was super happy when I met one of our leading persons from our teachers union, and she asked that, Mario, how are you implementing this? And she told that wherever she goes, when she's talking about things, she's always reflecting this. So we really need a common language, not some program, but something that people can be connected and understand that this is the life we are. This is something that we are aspirating, not something that we are trying to learn by heart.
Thanks, Mario. And Tony, you know, when Shelley was describing what's happening in her system, it reminded me of the last point that you made, second last point maybe, around systemness. that when you have a common language and everybody's connected to it, you're building relationships and you're building people's sense of belonging within that system, that everybody has a place, everybody has a voice. Tony, over to you for a comment on that concept of systemness when you see what's happening in Shelley's district.
Yeah, well, two things. One is that we are the system. There's been a sense in which we think that the system is somehow external to us. These are human systems. And so when Shelley speaks and Mario speaks, we're talking about whether, at the moment I'm thinking about being with our dozen global cities that now cover North America, Asia, and increasingly Europe. When they talk about their cities and their system, they're talking about the participation, right, as shapers and designers of that system. It's not being done to them. They are agents of creating what they would see as being new and far more fulfilling human systems. So I think you're right about the language and how we think about systemness. And I do think that we've got a couple of examples where we are shifting the language to make it clear what it is that we really mean. If you take, for example, the language of learner voice or choice, that is the first step to learner agency. That is a concept that is far bigger because we have, I think, been less than clear about the importance of the evolution of young people who are guiding and driving their own lives with the support of others in partnership. You can't talk about this as a limited concept. It's a concept where young people themselves are serious partners in creating a system of learning that is going to empower them. I mean, the more you start thinking about the language of power, and I don't mean personalised power, I mean socialised power, the better it is for us to be able to think about how our systems can evolve. And even the language we have at the moment about the performance of our systems. I mean, the language around performance, which has got to shift dramatically. As I mentioned before, we've already got a different way of thinking about the performance of our learning systems. And we've got language that goes with ranking and grading. This is not about that. It's about matching young people and their aspirations, right, to the way in which they'll think about their future, and a system that enhances and supports that with providing multiple pathways, not short-term dead ends. So I think we open a conversation of a completely different kind when we start thinking about systemness in those terms.
Wonderful. And we are going to go, I'm going to go to my friend Alex. I know that our colleagues online have been sending in some questions or comments. Alex, over to you.
Yeah, I think we have time for just one question right now. So this one is coming from Fatih, who wants to know what practical steps can educators take now to ensure that AI integration in the classroom is enhancing rather than replacing human connection and meaningful student interactions. And Shelley, Fatih wanted to hear in particular from you and how your school board is doing it.
So in terms of, we have a mental health strategy that would, again, if you would read our mental health strategy, would be incorporated into deep learning. So every one of our documents that are released would involve language from deep learning. So in terms of, obviously that's addressing well-being as well. So every person that works in our board, Nicola Benton, the superintendent, is here in her department for special education student services. They would also, and they're really working on it in the last couple of years as well, be able to speak deep learning language, so they would be able to enhance the environment, which would support the well-being of the student. They would be able to adapt pedagogical practices that would support the student well-being. So, and in terms of being practical across the system, I do believe that it's really important that we are supporting our teachers and our principals. I'm going to mention the word principals. If we want it to go across the system and support well-being and learning, it's changing. And they're busy. There's not enough teachers. They're trying to replace teachers. Keeping them focused on instructional practices, we have to support them centrally. So every month in our board, we provide a slide deck to them that's already with the script. They can obviously adapt it on something to do with one of those 4 elements or the global competencies and well-being. So it's providing those practical next steps for them and to take away some of the distractions that they have and provide them with support.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shelley. Do we have time for one more? We do not have time for one more. Well, on behalf of, I know, the audience here and the audience online, I would like to thank our 3 esteemed panelists. I know I learned a lot, and the good news is that we have the rest of the day together. I know we didn't get a lot of time for interaction during the session, but this will be the kickoff to the discussions that we'll be having for the rest of the day. So thank you to you all, and I'm going to hand it back to Denise.
Can we have another round of applause for our incredible panelists? Jennifer, Anthony, Mario, and Shelley, I really valued their insights on how we can reimagine and rebuild our futures through a transformation of our learning systems. I'll share with you a few takeaways while our next speaker is getting mic'd up. And one of the things that struck me was the idea of, that's probably not new for many of you, but of redefining and expanding the concept of the places where we learn to talk more about learning environments rather than classrooms or schools. Because when we think about classrooms and schools, that kind of limits what we can imagine, right? And then I think, Mario, you talked about how to achieve human flourishing and that well-being needs to be at the heart of good learning. And we therefore need to nurture learners' social and emotional development to be successful. Agency and co-agency. These were elements that you highlighted as being critical for preventing marginalization. And Anthony also talked toward the end about empowering learners, partly by reframing the language of our learning systems. One standout that came from Shelley had to do with the deep learning concept, which I thought was really exciting because there was a parallel concept of lifelong learning involved, and I was struck by the ambition to develop global competencies by incorporating these business partnerships that would impart practical skills to learners and allow them to also practice philanthropy. If at the end of their business project they were able to turn a profit, they could then donate to a charity of their choice. And then finally, of course, we all have to think about the focus on critical thinking in the age of AI, and you could argue that that's really a hygiene factor in education today. But now it's my pleasure to introduce Damilola Okonkwo, a passionate leader transforming education in Nigeria. Damilola is the founder of Key Academy, Africa's first 100% project-based school, and a driving force behind change through EdTech, teacher training, and policy reform.
So good morning, everybody. Thank you for the very warm welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where you are online. It's really great to be here today. As Denise mentioned, my name is Damilola Okonkwo, and I am the founder of Key Academy, an education company based in Lagos, Nigeria, and our aim is to transform education in Nigeria using 21st century project-based learning. This little girl over there is me, 8-year-old me. I grew up as a first-generation Nigerian immigrant in London, UK. I lived in the parts of London that they don't show you on TV, and I attended inner city government schools. I also lived on a housing estate, so it meant I was surrounded by many families from low-income households. Now, while that did present its challenges, one of the things that wasn't impacted was my education. I had a pretty good education. Now, for sure, it wasn't the most amazing education, but it was good. I came from a low-income household, so having this good foundation was exactly what I needed. My teachers were qualified, trained, received the support they needed. Our schools were regulated. I was even offered free school meals during the day, so it meant my parents didn't have to worry about sending me home or sending a packed lunch to school. School was free as well. So for me, I only have fond memories of being at school. I absolutely loved it, and it allowed me to have that foundation. Now, it also allowed me to climb up the social mobility ladder. I then went on to secondary school, university, and eventually started a career in finance, where I worked for banks like JP Morgan and Credit Suisse in the UK. Now, fast forward a number of years, and I've relocated to Lagos, Nigeria with my husband. And we're at that point, we have 2 children, and we're at that point thinking, what type of school do we want our children to go to? What type of environment do they want to be in? And we're looking at the trends in the world and seeing the way there's massive adoption of technology and the fact that the education space was just not keeping up. We were privileged, so we knew we could send our children to one of the best international private schools in Lagos, but we wanted more. So I sat there hashing out an idea for this amazing 21st century revolutionary school in Lagos, Nigeria. And as I started developing the idea, I went back to think about this little girl, this 8-year-old girl. And I thought about little boys and girls like me in Lagos, Nigeria, who needed that start, who needed that support in their education system. And I realized, this isn't just for my children. I want to develop a system for other children so children across Nigeria could benefit from it. And that's how Key Academy started. So what's the problem? I'm sure many of you are aware that Nigeria has the largest number of children outside of school. In addition, we have low education outcomes. But I'm not here to dwell on those points. They are valid and they're there, but I'm not here to dwell on those points. Because often when you think about education and Africa as a continent more broadly, we often talk about access. And while that does require the attention that it's getting, we don't often talk about the quality of education. And I think it's important that we do start having this conversation. The current education minister in Ghana, he said something. He says, if we continue educating our children in this way and we don't change the way in which we're educating them, we're not going to empower them and we will not produce a better continent. There's an interesting statement he says. He says, you cannot memorize your way out of poverty. And I want us to sit with that for a second. We need to move from a Nigerian national education system in Nigeria that focuses on rote learning, standardized testing, memorization, into an education that looks at developing 21st century skills that allow our children to really nurture the skills that they need in a world that you and I don't even know what it looks like now, sorry. We want them to become change makers and problem solvers, not just for their current environment, but also the world at large. And it's fundamental that we also support our educators. In Nigeria specifically, we haven't been able to invest the amount of money and time that we need into our educators. So often, many of them, especially within the national education system, are ill-equipped. And we need to support that. So the solution to that problem is Key Academy, as I said. The name of our organization is an acronym, and it stands for Keep Educating Yourself. We're speaking to the point that we raised earlier, that learning happens throughout our whole life. It's not restricted to the time at school or university. We're learning all the time. The first phase in our solution is our model school, which we launched in 2019, Africa's first 100% project-based school. Within this model school, our children are continually learning through projects, as well as developing those core competencies. But the fantastic thing about what they're doing is they're also developing 21st century skills. They're continuing to develop these skills on a daily basis through taking part in these projects. What our school also provides is an opportunity for teachers across Nigeria to see what 21st century learning looks like within our local context. And for us, that's really important, because often when you hear of new education paradigms and pedagogies, it's often things that feel so far removed from us and what we're doing in Nigeria. And we wanted educators across the country to have a bird's eye view into what project-based learning looks like on a daily basis in Nigeria. So you'll see that we share a lot online, and that is intentional. We've received requests to launch similar schools. We're based in Lagos and launch similar schools in other big cities in Nigeria. We've always declined those requests because that's not the aim of Key Academy. If we wanted to launch a number of schools and make a lot of money, of course, we'd launch more schools across the country, but that's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is penetrate this style of learning across every school in Nigeria, in areas that we necessarily can't reach. And in order to do so, we've developed a technology platform that will train and accredit teachers across Nigeria. We're in our early stages of developing this, and the aim is to take the learning that we're doing at Key Academy and codify this into a technology platform that schools across Nigeria can use. Teachers across Nigeria can be trained in 21st century project-based learning and accredited too. The third part of our solution is regarding publishing and digital content. We all know that learning is not restricted to the four walls of school. We need to take learning into our homes, into our communities, and that for us is incredibly important. We aim to create and publish both books and digital content that children can use across Nigeria to continue to take 21st century project-based learning into their homes and communities. But not just that, but also make them culturally and contextually relevant for those children. A lot of the materials, whether it's books or digital content that children in Nigeria consume today, is from an international lens, whether that be from a European viewpoint, an American viewpoint, and sometimes even an African American viewpoint. But that's not contextually relevant to the average Nigerian child. They need to be consuming content that they see themselves in, that tell their stories, and that's a huge part of learning, identifying yourself in the learning that you're taking part in. And finally, we recognize that in order to have the impact we want to have, we need to work with government at a local, state, and federal level to really rethink the national education system in Nigeria. How are we training our educators? What does pedagogy look like? What does our curricula look like? All of these things are things that we need to work through with the support of our government to make changes to. Now, when you think about project-based learning, it's very similar to PBL that you may see in other parts of the world. So we have similar tenets in terms of how we build and develop our projects. But what we've done is we've adapted PBL at Key Academy. And I wanted to give you an example of a recent project that our children took part in to kind of help you understand exactly how we do this. So our children, they were ages 7 to 9 years old, developed a project where they were looking at sustainable solutions for the people of Makoko. Now, Makoko is an indigenous, industrious community in Lagos, Nigeria. Unfortunately, there are some negative aspects of the community where they are a little deprived, and the area in which they live in does not have the things that they need to have a good and meaningful life and work environment. However, we didn't want to frame this project in a way that made the children feel that the people of Makoko were downtrodden and hopeless. No. When we develop projects, we try to include empowerment. So we frame the project in a way to say, how can you, as young people, develop solutions for the people of Makoko to change the way they both work and live? And that's how we developed this project. The children went on an amazing journey over the course of the term, working alongside subject matter experts. And again, this is another key part of the way in which we deliver PBL at Key. We bring in subject matter experts within our communities to support the learning that the children are taking part in. Imagine how amazing it must be to sit alongside an engineer at the age of 5 who's helping you build this prototype on solar power energy within your school. Not your teacher, but an engineer. And we continue to bring in these subject matter experts within our community into the education of the children. For us, that's also important. And what we're doing with PBL is we are creating change makers, children who recognize from as young as 7, even as 5, that they can come up with solutions to support their communities, to better improve their communities and the world at large. And imagine working on projects throughout your whole education, throughout your whole primary and secondary education, where you are continually change making. By the time you get to adult life, for you it'll be natural. Being a change maker is very much a part of who I am. And that's what we're trying to nurture. We recognize in order to build a better Nigeria, we need to also develop change makers who are problem solvers and innovators and empathetic about the people in their communities. While the children are developing their 21st century, while the children are working on their projects, they're also developing their 21st century skills, and that's key also. It's important that they spend their time developing these skills that will do them well as they move into adult life, whether they go into internships, entrepreneurship, or even into industry. So we see project-based learning as a fundamental part of what we're doing, and the children get the opportunity to share their ideas with their communities and friends. For us, it's key. Now, what can Nigeria teach others about PBL? Well, firstly, PBL isn't actually new. There have been indigenous forms of learning taking place in Nigeria for centuries old. Pre-colonialism, where people were using indigenous styles of learning to train generations. A learning that has been in existence for such a long time. So what we're trying to do is bring modern-day PBL and modern-day understanding of learning and education with indigenous forms, and really helping the children to identify who they are in their learning, promoting culture and history, and recognizing this isn't a new form of learning that's essentially just been placed upon us, but this is very much a part of who we are in our fabric. When I think about what we're doing at Key Academy, it's a massive mission and vision. It really is. We truly want to transform education in Nigeria and equip our children to be culturally conscious, innovators, change makers, and problem solvers. It's a mission, but it's a mission that we're so excited to be on, and we truly believe in the change that we're going to bring, not just to individuals within Nigeria or children within Nigeria, but what we're going to do across the continent, and really improve and raise the bar for education. The world is becoming increasingly globalized, and I absolutely love the fact that I'm surrounded by so many people from many different parts of the world. And I truly look forward to collaborating with you all as we work to transform education. Thank you.
Thank you, Damilola, for so eloquently sharing your journey toward the incredible work that you're doing in transforming education. Just a quick takeaway from Damilola: you cannot memorize your way out of poverty. We need young learners to become problem solvers and change makers by helping them develop core competencies and 21st century skills through project learning that extends into homes and communities and remains contextually relevant. But now it's my pleasure to welcome today's keynote speaker. He's Andreas Schleicher. He's a member of the Finnish Parliament and the Minister for Education and Culture, where he's responsible for early childhood education, general education, vocational training, and religious affairs. Welcome, Minister.
Thank you. I think this is the first time that I've been welcomed with music also. It feels very bombastic. But ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and future makers, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to Finland and to share these days for a discussion on the future of education, which is really a future issue, if any. I also hope that your visit and your meetings with your colleagues have been rewarding so far. The fact that you are meeting here in Helsinki is indeed something to be celebrated. Not only that you have dared to come here in November, even though you should get some kind of a medal for that, but also that you are taking your time to meet face-to-face with colleagues and stakeholders like this. Sending emails and having Zoom meetings are both great ways to collaborate, but I truly believe that magic happens when we come together and meet face-to-face like this. We all know that the world out there, what the world out there looks like. And I'm not talking about the weather, but the political darkness and the violence and the challenges that face the world at this very moment. Friends, we have a special responsibility to be the light in the darkness, because the things we are working on and the things that you are talking about here today, that's what brings hope to this world. So kudos to all of you. Thank you for being here. Dear friends, in the current turbulence of shifting democratic, social, technological, economical and ecological realities, a discussion on the future is more important than ever. While researchers have pointed out that forecasting the future has become increasingly difficult, future making and creating positive pathways into the future is, on the other hand, crucially important. Do you like inspirational quotes? Here's one with some serious truth to it. Nothing we do can change the past, but everything we do changes the future. So we need to have a strong vision for our direction. We are trying to meet global challenges also in the Finnish education system. I want to give you a brief overview of the current status and background of our system. During the past decades, our educational system has received international attention as being one of the best. Since 2001, the PISA studies have helped us to compare international scores in literacy, mathematics and science, while also addressing the importance of narrowing the learning gaps between the highest and the lowest scoring pupils. As you already know, our system is inclusive, based on schools that offer free education, free meals in schools, and equal access in all parts of the country. And when I mentioned the school meals here, I'd like to just to give an overview of the Finnish system. There was a study made by one educational editor a few months ago, actually. They asked both students and teachers what were the best things in school. And the students answered, my friends and the school meal. And the teachers answered, inspired students. And I think this creates for a very productive equation. If the students think that friends and the school meal, those are the good parts of school, and that makes them inspired pupils, and the teacher thinks that inspired pupils, that's the best part of school, then I think we have a perfect match that really can lead to good results. But if I go back to the present and the future, the guiding principle here in Finland is that the best school is the one nearest you, not only the one that few can afford to go to. So equality is a basis of the whole system. We are also proud of our highly educated and motivated teachers who have a high autonomy and freedom in their work. Their pedagogic knowledge holds universally high standards, and this can be seen in our national core curriculum 2, which, by the way, is already 10 years old. So these are some of the central elements of the Finnish system. A few weeks ago, I traveled to Fortaleza in Brazil to attend UNESCO's Global Education meeting with colleagues from around the world. In Brazil, I was glad to talk about Finland's educational system, and there was a lot of interest regarding, for example, a few of the things I just mentioned. Free school meals, highly appreciated by teachers, high quality education and pedagogy based on research and so forth. Exchanging views with international colleagues, just as we are doing here today, is both rewarding and inspiring. We have a lot to learn from each other. The meeting in Brazil focused on the work that still needs to be done to reach the social development goals regarding education, SDG as we call them, and number 4 here to be precise. There are still 250 million children outside of education. The world needs 44 million teachers at primary and secondary levels, as well as 6 million teachers in early childhood education in order to provide education for all on a global level. And we are not really there yet. So today, as we focus on the future of education, a greeting from the Global Education Meeting in Brazil, let's keep in mind that we need to carry on our efforts in promoting access to education on a global level. Ladies and gentlemen, coming back to Finland and our system, as you, however, may have noticed, even our skies here in Finland are not always blue and sunny. Well, certainly not now in November. But now I'm referring to something else. Currently, we are being challenged by a decline in educational outcomes in both core subjects and in students' self-esteem. At the same time, learning gaps between students from different socioeconomic and ethnic backgrounds have also been widening. While mathematical, reading and scientific literacy among Finnish students still continues to rank above the OECD average, we recognize that we have to redefine our educational policies along with the resources for implementing the changes will be needed in order to improve learning outcomes. In my position as Minister of Education, I'm working to reverse this trend. During this government term, we are bringing in restructuring measures and investing an additional 200 million euros into primary and lower secondary education. For example, as part of the restructuring and investment, we will increase the minimum number of classes in primary and lower secondary education by 3 weekly classes per year. One of these will be added for reading and one for mathematics at grade levels 1 and 2, and one for reading and literature at grade levels 3 to 6. So 3 weekly hours all in all. These additional classes will not expand the curriculum, but more time will be dedicated to learning. You could view this as going back to the basics. We are also developing the support for individual students, making sure that all receive the extra support when needed. This too is a very important measure. Making sure no one falls behind is key to a successful system. Legislation needed to supporting students that from time to time might need a little extra help is currently being re-evaluated and improved, with new legislation set to take effect already next year. With this, the administrative burden of teachers will be less, and the different types of support available will be harmonized nationally so that there will be enough support measures offered everywhere. This includes further strengthening the expertise of teaching staff, along with ensuring sufficient personnel resources to provide support. We have also introduced new measures to promote educational equality and equal treatment in early childhood education, preschool and basic education by targeting additional funding to early childhood education and care units and schools operating in disadvantaged neighborhoods. The purpose of this additional so-called needs-based support of around 50 million euros per year is to strengthen the quality of basic education, even out learning differences, and to prevent school segregation. With these funds, it's possible to hire more teachers and teaching assistants. Class group can also be made smaller, allowing teachers more time with each student. With these and other ongoing measures, our goal is to improve the quality of early childhood education and in that way support a good start on the educational path for everyone. Our goal is to improve the outcomes and the educational levels of all Finns by strengthening the basic skill set acquired in basic education and making sure that everyone achieves sufficient knowledge before exiting the school system. We want to create favourable conditions for economic growth, and this starts with good quality education, and we want to decrease the number of young people that remain outside education and employment. So, dear guests, we strongly recognise that we need to go further. There's a need for a more profound change in education, from reactive policy making to proactivity, from rethinking the way to organise education to rethinking the whole purpose of education. The OECD has, for example, predicted that global economic shifts mean that the traditional way of doing labour will not be available for all. Therefore, we have to discover new ways to understand the goals of education and motivate students. The unforeseen pace of technological development and the rise of artificial intelligence in particular also means that we are experiencing a shift from learning something that machines cannot do to learning something because it makes us better as humans, as individuals, and as a society. The global crisis of democracies, rising social polarization, and ecological challenges also signal an urgent need to think how schools can support ethics, empathy, and our ability to live together while respecting the limits of the earth. We are incorporating this mindset to developing our education, and one example of this is our current Future of Education project in the ongoing government programme. In this work, developed together with a large network of Finnish and international experts and stakeholders, we aim at creating a shared long-term vision for the future of the Finnish basic educational system. The aim is in part to understand what kind of opportunities and challenges the anticipated future may bring and which skills will be needed moving forward. The more profound goal of the vision work is to be a way for us to view what the future holds. As noticed before, when facing turbulent times and an uncertain future, we cannot rely on just reacting to changes we see. Instead, we need vision and courage to set off to in the right new direction. Although the path is uncertain, the educational vision serves to guide our actions in a proactive way. The motto for our work is that our education system should not only react to the changes we expect to see in the future, but it should support and create the future that we want to see. When schools change, they can change the world. You and me, working in education, we are also change makers. So, dear friends, finally, and once again, welcome to Helsinki, one of the learning cities and home to HundrED. I hope this meeting gives us all a chance to get inspired by the vision shared, and that this gives us the courage we need to change and create the future. Thank you very much for this opportunity to address you, and I hope to see you here all soon again.
Thank you, Minister Adlercreutz. There are not many politicians who reference the turbulence of our times and the darkness that's currently enveloping us when it's not an election season, so kudos to you. But I'm sure that you and our audience here in person and online appreciate the Minister's words about the foundations of the Finnish education system, the urgent challenges it's facing, such as weaker learning outcomes and some emerging inequality, and the work that still needs to be done to achieve Sustainable Development Goal 4, which is quality education, including updating and restructuring local education systems. But now we'll be going from Helsinki to Tallinn, And our next speaker is Alexei Yashin. He's Deputy Mayor of Tallinn and a key leader in education within the Tallinn city government. As a board member of Progressive Estonia 200, Alexei is deeply committed to advancing education policy and fostering inclusive learning environments in the Estonian capital. His work centers mostly on helping to shape the future of education, not just in Tallinn, but across Estonia. Welcome, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Honored guests and dear colleagues, it's a luck and it's an honor to be present on our event here. And I'd say that I like to say about myself that I'm a product of the system of education of Estonia. So it gave me a possibility to stand here as a Deputy Mayor of Tallinn in front of you and to speak about our educational system and the future of it. I'll say about the goal of our educational system right now. I'd say about the situation at the moment and our future plans as well. 2 days ago, I was briefed by the advisor to Minister of Education in Estonia, and he told me about around 10 reforms we are having right now in the educational system. And I was saying like, oh wait, can we see a bigger picture? What's the idea? What are we doing all of this at the same time? That's a lot, that's too much. I understand we have to do it, but what's the idea? And he said, of course, that's simple. We are just getting ready Estonia's society, our economy for the future, and for the challenges we have, and to be ready for all the things that are happening in the world. I say, okay, that's a good motivation. Let's continue working. Let's continue with the briefing. So the situation right now in Estonia, you all heard that we are #1 in Europe in our basic skills, top of the world. That was a news to me actually, but we are in top of creativity and growth mindset as well. Because four years ago at university, we were discussing on a big challenge, how to measure even better and how to boost our students' growth mindset, because we thought that it's a big problem. But PISA 2022 said that we are in the top. I think that's because we are pushing it and we are speaking about it. But that was a news to me. I'm not going to say too much about PISA, you know a lot about it, and that's not the point right now. Let's move towards the challenges we have at the moment in Estonia. And they have a plenty. Let's start with Russian schools. Around a quarter of our students were still studying partly or fully in Russian language, but the problem was not in language itself. In those schools, students were behind around 1 year from our Estonian colleagues. Estonian students in Estonian schools. That was the big trouble. The second is the socio-economical segregation we have as well. That's the #2 challenge in the city of Tallinn we have. It's not connected only to the language or to the ethnical backgrounds, it's economical as well. And I think that's the second challenge. And the third one is that we are in the top of spenders for education. Comparing to other OECD countries, we are all spending almost the same money as Finland per capita on education. But as our analysis says, we are building a lot of educational buildings last years. I'd say rather we're building temples. But we spent not too much money or not enough money for our teachers, for their working conditions. And that's why 20% of our teachers are not fully qualified, but our qualification norms and standards are pretty high. Every teacher from primary till the high school has to be master's level qualified teacher. So there could be not bachelor level teachers there. And the last thing for challenges, I say that I need to reflect on our cooperation with good friends from Finland. A lot of best practices we have in our educational system are, of course, recommended or taken from the educational system of Finland in the beginning of 90s when we restored our independency and decided which way we shall go. And I think that's an important part of our success story. And as we spoke yesterday with Deputy Mayor of Helsinki for Education, Johanna, we were discussing on socio-economical segregation in Helsinki and Tallinn as well, the role of the educational system. I've heard about some methods and programs and measuring them, and I already asked to send the results to Tallinn so we can analyze them, and maybe even more good practices we can take over. And now I finish with the challenges. I think those 4 were the main points. And now let's go to the future. Which are those plans and reforms which will bring us to the situation where Estonian society is ready for the challenges what we have in economy, in climate, and so on and so on. Firstly, as I said about the Russian schools, that there is a problem statistically proven in different levels. We are transacting them to Estonian language, and it will take 6 years and €500 million euros additionally invested into education. Mostly money goes to the eastern part of Estonia, next to the Russian border, where the most Russian speakers are located right now. And we increased the salaries of teachers by 50% there if they teach Russian kids in Estonian language. We added more teacher studying spots at our top universities, and we increased the level of stipendium teachers get. So every teacher student gets 400 euros right now back in Estonia, and we see the numbers that hundreds of young people decided to join this path and go study to get a teacher. So we started just 2024, this year, September, 1st and 4th graders, grades and kindergartens. So we are just in the beginning of the way. It's more than 5 years to go. And I would be happy, or my colleagues from Estonia would be happy to share the results afterwards. As I mentioned, Finland as good partners, we have seen that you increased the compulsory learning age some years ago. And we have one more problem, actually, one challenge more. 1,300 students stay at the level of basic education each year. So they are not getting the higher level of education than basic. That's a big problem. These are the youngsters who are not working, maybe not learning, and these numbers are increasing. One way to address this problem is to increase compulsory learning age. Right now it's 17, it would be 18, and there would be 5 educational paths for young people to decide. It could be just 1 year additional learning program, or it would be something more. And it comes with an vocational education reform as well. We wanted to be more flexible, we wanted to be more attractive, and up to 50% of students after the basic education shall go there. And we need a bigger cooperation with the private sector to get new workers with new skills for our economy. And last 2 future plans. I had 2 minutes, I've seen the paper. Last 2 future plans we have. One of them is educational agreements. As I said, we have a problem of 20% of teachers who are not fully qualified. It could backblast us in some years, in PISA results as well. And that's why we had a discussion between a ministry, municipalities and teachers. How could we improve the working conditions of teachers? We have this really good text of the agreement ready, and right now the municipalities need to confirm it and to start to implement it. And of course we spoke a lot about AI on this conference. We're going to speak more about it later on. And let's say that we started this year the strategical thinking in the field of education, how to use, how to implement the AI in Estonian educational system. We are making a cooperation with universities, our best minds, local best minds in Estonia. What do they think? The main idea is no unnecessary restrictions or no restrictions at all, and courses for our teachers, how to use AI, how to support the educational process. So AI as a part of it, and there is no conservative thinking towards the AI, only how to use it and use it for the best. So we'll finish with one last idea. I'd say again, which is the goal or the idea of all of these reforms. The idea is to be ready for the future. And I think that we are doing a good work to be a partner for Finland, to be a partner for other European countries, to be a good partner to the world. In all of the solutions, and as a small country, we can still be the best within education. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Yashin, for your insights into Estonia's educational landscape. And I think it was interesting that you chose not to focus entirely on your successes leading Europe in the most recent PISA test scores, but also enlightening us on some of the challenges that you're currently grappling with, such as socioeconomic inequality, issues transitioning Russian-speaking learners to education in Estonian, and the need for teacher qualification and compensation, all in a bid to be ready for the future. At this point, we're going to end the live stream, so thank you to those of you who were able to join us online. We appreciate your participation in the event. It will resume tomorrow morning sharp at 10 o'clock, and we hope to see you then. As we continue today, I'd like to